Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of What's Happening Now with CNI Solutions. As always, remember to like, share, and comment on this broadcast live, as there could be some information here that's not only useful for you, but to somebody else. Coming up events, we'll be on the 15th of July. We'll be in the Northwoods community housing area, and we'll be running the concession stands where Miss Brittany will be doing what all we going to be serving there?
We are going to have our usual with our popcorn, our snow cones, and this year Northwoods want to do a little bit different, so we're going to have some cotton candy as well. Come on by to CNI Solutions. Talk to me so I can give you guys some information about who we are and how we can help you.
Outstanding. So, hey, if y'all going to be in the community area, please come on down to Northwood. It is going to be fantastic. I think Generosity Foundation, they're going to have a petting zoo out there. They're going to have water slides. They're going to have other vendors out there doing things. It's all free for the community. That is going to be on July 15th. I believe it starts at 11 to 4. It's going to be from 11 to 4 on that day. So make sure you stop past the CNI Solutions tent. If you're wanting to volunteer for that day, come on down. You can volunteer. Just give us a call here at CNI Solutions, 256-459-6020, and we can get you signed up as a volunteer, or you can shoot us an email at info@cnisolutions.org, and we'll get your information, and we'll go ahead and sign you up. Also, don't forget the 30th of July. We're having our back-to-school braid-a-thon. I know that flyer's been out there circling around, so if you got kids in grades 6 through 12, have them come on down to the Bob Harrison Senior Center, and we can go ahead and get them braided up, get them haircuts, or get locks retwisted. You must sign up on the website. This is going to be an extraordinary event. We got a lot of people involved this year who's going to be coming down there helping out. We got Hair Queen is going to be down there doing a lot of content for those. If you are a braider and you would like to be braiding in this event, please reach out to us and we'll get you signed up as one of our braiders. So tonight's broadcast, our special round, bonus rounds, is going to be brought to us by T&R Web Solutions, where they will take care of all your web design and solutions that you need. If you're into needing a website set up, please look up T&R Web Solutions. Tonight in the studio, we have a special guest, and this is going to be a different guest. We have Miss Lauretta Moore. Miss Lauretta, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about Hedonistic? Hedonistic. Go ahead and put that up there, Ms. Kaya. Hedonistic. What does that mean? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, so Hedonistic Headmistress is my moniker, and I use that for both BDSM and kink type conversations, but also I use it for sex education. And I do business as the Hedonistic Headmistress, but also Lighthouse Elevations is what we use for more of the PG, the family-friendly kind of version of sex ed.
Outstanding. I know there's going to be a lot of viewers out there who's going to have a lot of questions. And please, viewers, this is a kid-friendly program, so please do not get too crazy with your questions, because she's not only going to be able to answer it a certain way. And as like everybody else, I have a ton of questions. So you and I had talked, and what makes this so interesting to me, you and I had talked before. Not only are you a headmistress, but you're also an elder in the church.
I am.
So how does that work? How did that come about?
How did that come about? Boy, it's funny because I was not raised in the church. So what came about was really just a calling that we respond to like anyone else. Right. The Spirit will snatch you up right where you are, sometimes. And I got bounced around through different denominations growing up. My mother was unchurched, but I lived with my aunt for a period of time, and she was a Jehovah's Witness. And when you were in her house, you were in Rome, you did as the Romans did.
Right.
So, and then once I got to go live with my father, my grandmother, Big Lauretta, was a Seventh-day Adventist. So totally different kind of theologies, but still was the love of God. And once I got to find Christ for myself, I wound up in a Presbyterian congregation. So I am an elder in the Presbyterian Church, PCUS.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what it is that you do and how you are servicing couples and people who are in need. This isn't just something that you do. Do you actually go to a school, a credit? I want to say credit, but like a class where you get certified in, correct?
Sure.
So how long does something like that take?
It depends on the institution that you're working with. I am working with sexologist E. Michelle at Pleasure Masters Institute. And so her cohort group meets weekly, but in between those weekly meetings on Thursday nights for a couple hours where we're doing coaching, that kind of thing, there's a lot of reading and a lot of understanding anatomy. And what she prepares us to do is not only to be able to coach individuals who may be wrestling with identifying their pleasure and kind of putting a name or dealing with shame. So to certain extents, it's kind of one-on-one. Some of it's couples related kind of coaching. And for others, it's group education. Some of them, the groups go over better face-to-face in person, but in the post-COVID, we'll call it post-COVID because of what the CDC is now saying, but a lot of the instruction where I began to get more curious and intrigued and like, hey, I feel led to do this. It was done virtually. And so we did a lot of use of apps like, we use Zoom, of course, for our meetings. And then for others, we use the Circle app for our weekly classes, our formal instruction. We've used the Clubhouse app, which is an audio app primarily. And on the Clubhouse app, I am very heavily involved with Tatiana Carrera and her brand. The brand is Oralicious, but the group that convenes during these summer months, typically a couple times a week, is the Pleasure Journey. And it's where people are coming together and all walks of life. You have swingers, you have BDSM practitioners, you have individuals that are dabbling and kind of learning about certain things. You have people who consider themselves kinky with different love styles like polyamory. And then you just got people that are just kind of curious.
So, I've seen a lot of polyamory on TikTok that is happening. In America, I should say, and not only where we used to see it like up in Utah or up in that areas, but it's now spread down south a lot, especially in the Georgia, Tennessee areas. I've been seeing a lot of that. So that is interesting that for that movement that's happening there. So how does one actually can become a sexologist? Is there an age limit, for someone to do that? And there's a prerequisites, for that?
So sexologist is the type of field that is not very heavily regulated at this point along the journey. And so naturally you would want somebody who is mature enough to be able to handle the discussion. And sometimes the content, you can get kind of cringy when people tell you what they like, especially if you have grown in organized religion where you have learned to kind of put things in a box and categorize people and stigmatize. So for sexology, it's important for you to find the right institute because the certification means something, and there's different. You can go after the ABS certification. ACS has disbanded, but the American Board of Sexologists still exists. And then there's the ASECT certification that deals a lot more with sex therapy and somatic touch and that kind of hands-on work, whereas I typically don't get hands-on. It is more about the knowledge exchange. To get hands-on would be the consent to allow me to demonstrate because you're not grasping what I'm saying. But so I don't get so much into the work of it all, the hands-on work of it, as I do making recommendations for pleasure work and for things for consideration, more knowledge, and really try some things and see where your pleasure limits lie and what you what you enjoy.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Do you find a lot of couples? Do you get a lot of couples in that you have helped and they have left a better union?
This is what I find. I find a lot of women
Mm-hmm.
who are curious and want the information, but have a lot of resolute kind of, oh no, my husband would never do that, or my significant other, my partner is not into that.
Right.
Because naturally in this field, everyone's not heterosexual. So some it's my partner, others it's whatever it is, whatever they refer to it. There's
Right.
no judgment here. So there are some situations where it is the third or further, I won't say down the line because everybody doesn't do a hierarchical poly, but it's someone else who is trying to understand more and maybe bring a different energy into the relationship. People feel what is often misconstrued. They feel like I'm too vanilla, and I'm in a dynamic with someone who colors all outside the lines, and I'm a little bit too plain and I want to understand some things. But a lot of times it's not hard to understand when somebody breaks it down to you. It's harder to get to reprogram,
Mm-hmm.
to get out of us what has been imparted within us about what isn't ladylike. This is a very misogynistic culture that we live in. And so when women are more liberated and more assertive about what they enjoy, what they don't like, their pleasure limits, and setting clear boundaries, it's easy for people to kind of want to shut you down.
Right.
And to tell you, well, no, you shouldn't be doing this, and God isn't pleased,
Right.
with that kind of thing. And so,
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, it brings the question back. Being an elder in the church,
Mhm.
and also being a headmistress,
Mhm.
how does your church, I guess in particular, how do they react to you? How does your pastor
Mhm.
react to you when you say, "Hey, well, this is what I do"?
Mhm.
Do they try to shame you? Or I think you used the word, what is it, church
hurt.
hurt?
Mhm.
Do they church hurt you?
Well,
How's that relationship?
I'm not in a place where I think I could allow anyone, not even my pastor, who is not like that, but to have me with church hurt. I've had church hurt previously. In the Jehovah's Witness denomination, they're quick to disfellowship when you are doing something that is outside of the realm of what they deem acceptable, or outside of quote unquote Jehovah's will.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about church hurt, like I'm at a place along my journey where I don't tolerate that. I
Right.
have a relationship with my Lord and Savior, and you are more than welcome to show me what the word says about this, that, or the other. But the interpretation, I'm going to take it to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not looking for acceptance, or so how does my church members feel? Well, like anything else, when it comes to my sexuality or even my business, I don't know what all my church members do. They don't know what I do. They don't
Right.
know what I do professionally from 8 to 5 most days, and they don't know what I do on a side business necessarily. But my pastor is my shepherd, and so I am pretty transparent with him. And the other thing is that I don't encourage anything. People come to me.
Right.
And
Right.
so I don't, I'm not out here telling anybody this is what you should do or this is what you ought to do. I give space for people to be true to who they are
Right.
at this point along their personal and their pleasure journey. And I am one of the few in my cohort group and that I have encountered that are in this line of work. Most will throw up a wall in a heartbeat. It's like, I'm not butting heads with theology, because
Right.
they expect for people to be very dogmatic about their views, very judgmental and dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any problem with folks that are dealing with church hurt or who are trying to be clear about what our Creator's position is. Our bodies were designed for pleasure.
Right.
And some will say, yes, but that needs to be within the confines of marriage. And yet we see that whether we are dealing with a covenant type commitment or whether we are dealing with young folks experimenting and trying to understand their bodies and how this works, and especially in comparison to what I saw on these different sites that I probably had no business on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned something there that is interesting to me when you talked about young people and these sites. Can one argue that what you're doing is promoting sexuality with young people? Would they argue that?
They could argue that I'm promoting it. They could argue that I'm condoning it.
Mm-hmm.
They could argue that as a leader in the church, it is misleading, almost like I'm giving permission.
Right.
So to be clear, my clients are adults.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to working with young people, you only do that in concert with a parent or guardian.
Okay.
But many parents and guardians are wrestling themselves with the accuracy in the message for young people. And they're dealing with their own, and I'm going to use the term demons for lack of a better term, since we brought up the church, but they're dealing with their own misconceptions about what has been suppressed.
Right.
If you grew up in the church, likely you didn't not hear someone telling you, sit down, quit being so fast.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to have on some pantyhose with that skirt,
Right,
with that
right.
dress, act
short.
like a lady.
Get your cover, put your cover over your knees.
Yeah, you're not gonna be sitting up distracting pastor, but pastor is human,
Right.
just like the rest of us. And at the end of the day, the human inclinations that the old and young alike feel, to want to feel desired, to want to understand how our reproductive organs and our genitals and our genitalia works. It's my private part, so at one point, am I okay to share them?
Right.
That kind of thing. I don't get so much into the theology. I get more into the kind of understanding how things work.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to dispel myths.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And in that, we had the previous conversation being, like I told you, I'm a parent with the open door policy.
Sure.
And I have a teenager and a preteen. How would I go by bringing that up or having you come and help get that myth of, oh, sex is just this or that, or I've seen or heard kids at the school doing this and doing that, and now I'm inquisitive.
Sure.
I'm the type of parent, I will definitely do a what we call electronic check in our house.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see what my kids are looking at.
Okay.
So if I pop up and I see a site and I'm like, okay, it's time to have that talk, how am I going by with that? Or do you offer something like that?
Yes. And I'm in the works of putting I embrace the old African proverb. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you take folks with you.
Okay.
And so what I find is that sometimes parents know their own children,
Right.
but sometimes the ability to have these conversations with other parents, with other young people, makes it a little less, as young people say, weird.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make it weird, right?
Right.
So
That
the
is
ability,
the favorite word of these children now.
yes, and so the ability to normalize conversations about sex and sexuality, they're having it anyway. I don't care what channel you're watching. It could even be Disney. There are characters who are portraying being of an alternative lifestyle of some sort. And I say that as shudder a little bit, because I know that there are some who say, don't call it that. It's not an alternative lifestyle, because then you're promoting heterosexuality as the norm, thus making us sound abnormal. So, but it doesn't matter what channel you're watching. You're seeing the bisexuality, you're seeing the homosexuality, you're seeing sex period,
right,
or sexual undertones. They're learning it just like many of us learned violence at a very young age, watching Tom and Jerry, watching, Looney Tunes and things like that. They are learning. And like I said, I don't care if it's Disney. There are still different, more adult content being infused. They're being exposed to it. They're curious. And a lot of times when parents are saying, oh, I have an open door policy, that means if I'm willing to come and talk to you.
Mhm.
And sometimes I don't necessarily have the words for the way that I'm feeling. And sometimes you're saying my door is open, but our household conversations have shunned certain lifestyles or certain um, actions, that kind of thing. So oftentimes I think that it is important when it comes to our young people, one, not to rely on public school because a lot of it is outside of the classroom.
Mhm.
I want to say in our great 50 states, there's only like 19 that are requiring sex education. Most of those are centered around abstinence education, which we know to a certain extent is unrealistic.
Very
People
much
are
so.
curious. They are having sex at the middle school age. They're getting busted in the hallways, in the washrooms,
Mhm.
in different places, on the school buses.
Right.
So they're curious, and the ability to empower them as well as to help them to understand anatomy and to kind of understand their sense of worth and not shame. And then if we could take the conversation a little deeper, everybody sitting at this table is the same color.
Mhm.
And in our community, not only do we not want to talk openly about sex, but then we don't want to talk about when someone has been sexually violated. I don't want to trigger anyone, but when someone has been, we don't want to talk about that either.
Mhm.
We want to just keep sweeping stuff under the rug, but then we just assume that if you are willing to follow the instruction, which is wait until you're married to engage or indulge, then you're automatically divine what to do, how to do it, what goes where, what is that supposed to look like?
Mhm.
No, that doesn't happen. Most people don't just divinely and intuitively discern certain things.
Right.
And so to know and understand and be comfortable with your body and comfortable being able to declare what you like and dislike and being confident about who you are, it actually has the opposite effect. I remember going to my father and being like, Dad, I'm going off to college. Don't you think I should get on birth control? And I was raised by a single dad after being taken away from my mom. And I was like, hell no, you're not getting on birth control. And I was like, what? And my feelings were hurt because it took a long time for me to get the nerve to have that conversation.
Right.
Right.
And he too felt like he had an open door, not saying you don't, but he felt like he had an open door policy. But when I came to him to talk about sex and wanting to be on birth control, I said, girls go off to college and they make their husbands and, and they're trying things. And, I just want to make sure I'm going to be good. You didn't get on no birth control. I put you on birth control. You'll be out here having sex
Right.
40 going north. And really, it is the opposite.
It is.
The
Right.
ability to empower me and let me know that what I'm sitting on, and I'm going to quote Tatiana, who I mentioned earlier, has the house on Clubhouse. She said that her grandmother used to teach her, what you have between your legs starts wars that brought down the White House. Like you're sitting on something.
Mhm.
And so to understand your worth and understand how precious that is, even if someone has come along and deflowered or devalued you, but to build someone back up, that if they're not going to be out here trying to hand it out.
Right.
Right.
They're going to be out here saying, no, you're going to have to work. What you're doing is just this and it's not impressing me.
Right. Hey, folks, those who are watching and viewing, if you do have a question for Ms. Moore, please make sure we keep it, respectful and PG, because this is a PG friendly program. So, Ms. Moore, you said something earlier when you talked about sex education in the school. And if we're teaching our kids sex education now, the way you're describing it, does it make them want to have sex? Or does it make them say, okay, now I understand it. Now I know what's where and how's how. I'm good now. Because, I growing up for myself, this was a subject that my parents didn't talk to me about.
Sure.
My mom and dad didn't say, hey, son, come on, sit down. You're now 13, 14 years old. We're going to talk to you about the birds and the bees and how things work.
Right.
It was kind of like how you said it was trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go out and figure things out on my own. Like this, I didn't know what was what, where was where, and why was why, but I was curious.
Sure.
I wanted to know. I wanted to know what it was like and like this. So I did all those things. So does it make a difference if we now teach it and show it the right way and make somebody says, oh, okay, now that I understand how it works,
Right.
and now that I understand what's supposed to happen, I'm good. I don't need to do it.
Sure. It's funny you asked that because you asked the question and then you answered it.
Mm-hmm.
The curiosity is there already. Does having the conversation make them any more curious than anytime they turn on the radio and hear lyrics
Right.
that are suggestive or outright?
Right.
Hearing about WAP and, and when we, not to put Tank under the bus, but, does it make them any more curious than when they are surfing on the net? Or if they end up on different sites, not endorsing anybody, but, most folks know where they can go to find free engagement. Does it promote it any more than when we're watching films and they are either highly suggestive or borderline soft porn?
Right.
Nope. But
interesting.
When I'm watching those types of things, what it teaches me as a young impressionable person or mind is performative sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can remember at the age when I decided to indulge, because I felt like the last American virgin. Almost everyone in my crew had already had sex, and I was still, holding out based on childhood trauma and fear. I was just afraid of getting pregnant, afraid of the abstinence education programs that we had in my high school. It was almost like Scared Straight. They were showing us pictures of what it looked like when things weren't right. And it made me like, I don't want no parts of that, right? And so I remember finally indulging and thinking, I got suckered. First of all, it was extremely painful. It wasn't the theatrical type performance that I had seen on television, maybe because I didn't choose Alan Payne, but I remember for something about Jason's lyrics stood out to me, and it wasn't anything like that, you know what I mean? And I just remember thinking I felt hoodwinked, run amok, led astray, I felt like I had been bamboozled, but I just still had a lot of questions.
Right.
And many of young people's questions are being answered by their peers who are given the best version of what they've heard. And it's like a sick game of telephone.
Right.
And for anyone who's watching who could identify with being Greek or even non-Greek, part of a social club or an organization, it's like a haze. It's like a generational haze. You're going to get out here and figure it out just like I did. But then we want to turn around and shame when folks are doing the best they can, fumbling through, but they end up pregnant.
Right.
But they end up with a sexually transmitted disease or infection. When they end up, which can be worse to me, with that oxytocin, release, it's like then I'm attached and acting a fool out here, slashing tires, ruining, and
stay away from them ones.
Acting a monkey uncle.
Yeah.
And it's not even really so much that you did something so amazing. You just introduced me to something I hadn't felt before.
Right.
And nobody talked to me about it. So I equated that with my worth and my value, as opposed to it being what it is. To my partner, it was just sex.
Right.
And to someone who is wrestling with figuring out who they are and their emotions and whatnot, it can be devastating.
Right.
It can be emotionally debilitating. And when you look at young people, the rates of suicide, not that most people are committing suicide because of the sex they are or aren't having, but it is the feelings of isolation and loneliness and being misunderstood and feeling pressured and judged that just kind of continue to surmount. And then here we are.
So, question for you: you definitely been around the block a few times, because you mentioned the VHS tapes from back in the day.
Right.
So, at what point did you decide in your career, your life, that you wanted to become a sexologist?
That is probably something that I decided in the pre-pandemic, just literally like I would say the fall of 19 is when I started to get more curious about the educational side of it. And it started with me dealing with Chuck out of Decatur, Georgia. Shout out to the frat. And he had the science of sex and sexuality. And the knowledge that he was kind of dropping gems, and come to find out, he was working on his ASEC certification to do more with sex therapy. And so I started wanting to get more knowledge from him. And he introduced a group of us, a group of women that he called WOW, Women of the Word. And each one had been first lady previously, married to a pastor. Another, two of us had been in seminary or taking classes. And each of us had dealt with things like church hurt. Each of us had dealt with things about wanting to empower others about their sex and sexuality. And each of us have a genuine calling on our lives.
Right.
And so when I met other women who felt just as strongly as I did about, there is nothing, you're not going to shame me about being bold enough to speak about it. You're not going to make like it makes me less of a Christian to not condemn a young person or an adult. Because let's be clear, for as much as we have engaged about young people that don't know, there are plenty of young adults and middle-aged adults who are still out here fumbling through their relationships, fumbling through their marriages. Polyamory has become more prevalent and out in the forefront, whereas before we just didn't talk about the fact that, there were side babies and side relationships and things like that. Historically, we just try to sweep that under the rug. But to find that there were others who understood the passion that I had for obtaining the knowledge, for paying it forward, and it didn't make me any less of a Christian, doesn't make me any, I'm not going to hell. For what I choose to do. And I find a lot who are pursuing either as a sex coach or a sexologist who are like, I'm not going to butt heads with theology. And I'm like, good, send them my way.
I tell you what, you definitely bring the phrase when my dad and them used to say, boy, you need to find yourself a good church woman to a whole new level like this. Now, I don't know why you kept saying go to church, Dad. Wait, I get it now. So you have kids, correct?
I do. I have two sons.
Two sons. How old?
21 and 28.
What does the 21 and 28-year-old think about mom being a sexologist?
21-year-old is an open book. He wants to talk to me about, Mom, what's this? Mom, help me understand. Mom, 21 is kind of an open book when it comes to, he is very introverted when it comes to dealing with others, but he knows his mom ain't gonna never steer him wrong.
Right.
So he will come to me and ask me questions. Now, my 28-year-old is a little bit more, he can be very extroverted with others, but when it comes to talking to his mom about sex, he can be a little bit more introverted. But they don't think anything about it. I think they have long since known that their mama was sexually active. Even though, we had this rule kind of growing up. My dad was real big about like he didn't bring women to the house as a single dad raising me. And so I grew up kind of with that same, like I had to feel a certain way about you. You had to be in the picture for a long time before I would bring you to my house. And so because of that, I used to have relationships with people like, I know you got a husband. I know you got a man, because I can't come to your house. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's that either you have your own space or you will pay to play. And I'm not saying pay to play, like, don't try to hand me $40. I will sock you. But you can get the room if you want to. If you don't have the space, you don't have your own place, then you'll get us a room.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I was real big on protecting my sons. I am a survivor of being deflowered.
Mhm.
And we'll put it that way to keep it PG and not to trigger anyone. And so I felt like I had a small window of opportunity to protect my children. So the ability to not have, different men coming all up and do, I'm your daddy today. That kind
Right.
of, we weren't doing that. We weren't doing any of that.
Oh, back in the day, we don't have a lot of uncles at the door.
Exactly.
Right.
And so what do my boys think? They think that their mom, had friends and things like that, but they've long since known. And plus, just like I did, I rambled through my kids' stuff. I found my mom's sex toys. I found her VHS. And try to put it back to the counter. Somebody knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
To try to sneak and watch that VHS port and try to put the counter back to just about where they were on it. And so at different times, they've gone through my stuff.
Right.
And so they know that their mom, is sexually active. But there's never any judgment, and they always know that their mom is an open book. So, like I said,
that is awesome.
They'll
That
ask
is
away.
awesome. That is awesome. This is being brought to us by T&R Web Solutions for taking care of all your web designs and web solutions. Please look up T&R Webs. So, question: what is the most prominent advice that you've ever been given?
Probably the best piece of advice that I've ever been given is to thine self be true. To thy own self be true.
Okay.
And I strive daily to walk in my truth. I promote authenticity. I'm also an intimacy instigator, but I encourage people to be true to who they are. And so everybody is not the highly sexual being that I am, but who I am is not sure if or when I'll ever get married. Who I am is not certain of a lot of things, but I am true to who I have to, the things that I've discovered about myself up until this point along the journey. And like probably both of you and the majority of our viewing audience, like I'm still learning things about myself. We are ever evolving beings. Some of the things I swore I wasn't into, when I got into this just like 3 years ago, I had a list of hard limits. Several of them have become open to revision. The more, because initially I thought this is something I absolutely am not into, and it better not ever happen. And if it does, blah, blah, blah. And then it happened, and I was like, do it again. So I have found myself holding myself accountable to being authentic.
Okay. All right. Give me a book that you have read that has been instrumental to you.
I think I would go all the way back to, is it Gary Chapman who said, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. What I found at the height of the pandemic was the necessity to protect my peace. And so when it comes to letting things go, I struggled for many years with forgiveness. I did. I used to say ignorant, and I said it like that for a reason. I would say ignorant stuff like, I'm the queen of holding grudges, and you don't want to cross me. And it takes so much energy to stay mad at somebody. It takes so much unnecessary to hold on to drama and foolishness. And so what I have learned as I have just continued to mature is, number one, the necessity to purge. So not only is it about getting rid of things that are no longer serving me, but sometimes it's about looking at the friendships and the dynamics that I've engaged in as well, and saying, is this really where I want to concentrate my time, my energy, my talent? Is this serving me? There's the old cliche that, friendships or relationships are for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And there aren't too many that have proven to be lifetime worthy. Many of them have been for a very specific reason or a season. And so being able to know when to call that quits, it's no longer serving me. And some of it, it's about leaving it right here, and I may come back to it later, or I may not.
Right.
But I have learned not to sweat the small stuff, and in the end, it's all small stuff.
Okay. All right. Last question, and this is going to be kind of a crazy one for you, but what is the one tool you cannot live without?
My wand. No, I'm just kidding.
Your wand.
The fairy godmother wand. PC. No, one tool that I can't live without. Probably in this day and age, I would have to say, and I'm sure plenty have said it before, is the internet.
Internet.
Yeah, you know, I came from that generation of look it up.
Right.
And now Encyclopedia Britannica does not serve me anymore.
Right,
you know,
right.
the ability to crack the spine on a book feels really good when I'm reading certain things. But the ability to be able to quick just at the palm of my hand and go through and get the knowledge that I'm trying to either recall or to gain. I think the internet is probably the one tool. But I love that you acknowledge that in this business, tools are something totally different.
Yeah.
And I have some tools that are expendable that are not, that I couldn't see myself without either. But at the end of the day, it would probably be the internet, the ability to truly gain differing perspectives and to have access to peer-reviewed publications and articles and materials that I can get people's opinions, but then I can go to the quote unquote experts too, with the touch of a hand. And I'm such a blurred. There's times where I'm just sitting up, just reading and just adding more to the cadre of knowledge that I've already acquired, but it's like you just never know when you're going to call upon it. And so there's certain things that I kind of pride myself in knowing a little bit about. And there are other things that I am determined to not just know about from a theoretical standpoint, but to actually experience. And so some of the things is like, yeah, I tried it, not like it. And other things it's like, I tried it. Get you some of that.
Get you some of that. So for the viewers out there and for those who might want to get in contact with you because they're looking to explore their sexuality and how can they reach you?
You can reach me at Hedonistic Headmistress at gmail.com. And the flyer is, or I should say my graphics are there. It'll give you both the email address and the website. That's kind of a work in progress. So don't fool with the website so much. Just send me an email. And what I like to do is a consultation up front, at least a half-hour consultation about what are you feeling and what are your goals. And sometimes it ends up being that I refer you out. That's not within my wheelhouse. Just like some people are like, oh, you know, I don't want to deal so much with church hurt. I don't want to deal as heavily with the trauma that comes with, because I like dealing more so with individuals who I won't say are whole, because in some areas we're all broken. But when you are working to overcome trauma, like it's almost an uphill battle. Until you get to the place. So I'm not a therapist. And I would rather refer you to an ASECT certified therapist that can help you to get past that, as opposed to me as a sexologist, because I like to deal with people who at least think that they are whole. So
you mentioned something there, and that was interesting. Do you find people come to you running away from something? So do they, you know what I mean? Do they try to use the sexual part of it to run away from something that happened to them trauma-wise? And where in reality, they don't need a sexologist, they need a therapist right now.
There are some who have held the shame for so long. So not only did we not talk about it in the family, but I haven't revealed it to my spouse. And so I cringe every time something happens, but I haven't articulated what it is, because I don't want to talk about it. To talk about it brings more. So yes, I find people with unresolved trauma. and who are seeking a level of what they think is exploration, but there's some healing and wholeness that needs to happen before they're really ready to kind of venture out like that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Great. If I can get the producer, just put your flyer up one more time for the viewers. And there was something I wanted to point out. I noticed that the design that you used and the women on there, they're not your typical asymmetrical women.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to make them more voluptuous. Was that in purpose? Was that,
Yes.
is that supposed to represent more of the naturalness of our culture people, or?
Yes. It represents the naturalness of our culture. It represents the imperfection that is perceived because I deem myself perfectly imperfect.
Right.
Every curve right along with every stretch mark,
Right.
every roll, every dimple. So it was important to me to not only kind of validate what I've got going on in
Mhm.
terms of being a plus size woman in my graphics, but also I find that some of that is what is leading you to me. It's not so much that you want to understand kink so much you're not comfortable with your body.
Right.
You've not done enough of the mirror work or the shadow work to be able to feel confident disrobing, to feel confident keeping the lights on, to
Right.
feel confident wearing lingerie or exploring within the confines of what's legal, because you've got some that, what goes on in the bedroom. Well, who says we having sex in the bedroom? If you haven't christened every room in your house yet, you haven't lived. And then we out here on balconies and doing all kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, and again, if you're looking for validation in your walk, and if that's your husband, who said it has to be a certain way?
Right.
It has to be whatever you define. Because what happens between you all in that covenant commitment is undefiled. So the ability to kind of validate some things and normalize some things, those are the things that I'm working on. And I do that in one-on-one consultations and coaching. I do that with workshops. Like I said, there's a mirror work workshop and I'm actually looking at potentially utilizing the Johnson Legacy Center because they have this room that is completely mirrored. It's almost like a dance studio.
Wow. Yeah.
And so for many, the ability to create different affirmations and speak life to yourself, to breathe life into yourself and to empower yourself. I don't care where you are along your pleasure journey. I don't care what size you are. I don't care your age, but my classes are the age of consent on up. But wherever you are along your journey,
Right.
you have some who are widowed. You have some who are coming back into this dating pool after being married for years and are just trying to understand some things and not feel disheartened and disillusioned. And so much of what we talk about, while it can be it has sexual undertones, but BDSM is not sex. Empowerment and body positivity, that is not sex. There's a distinct difference between eroticism, intimacy, sex. And so the ability to kind of work on ourselves, there's no shame in it.
Outstanding. Hey, Lauretta, I appreciate you coming in here this evening and speaking with us. For those who are viewing this, I know we had to keep it PG, but please reach out to Miss Lauretta, and you can get all the information that you so desire for yourself and your loved one or your significant other to take it to that next level. As we like to say back in the day, kick it up a notch.
Yes. As raw as you can handle it.
Hey, we definitely appreciate you coming by and stopping by and bless us with this information for our viewers. Again, viewers, remember to go ahead and share this information for those who you think who need this information, who wants to speak with Miss Lauretta on a one-on-one. You're trying to make some different things in your lifestyle with yourself and your partner. She would be the one you need to speak to, all right? And as always, remember, Your yesterday is not your today, and your today is not your tomorrow. Good night.